Hey, good morning guys, and welcome back to Max Talk. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit in more detail about use of cover and also taking and breaking cover. And we're going to put a little bit more realism onto this and give you a little bit more information to follow up on the two talks I did, which I titled Why the Lone Wolf Will Die, the Lone Wolf Operator Will Die. The first one was Breaking Contact, and the second one was in the individual assault. And the reason I did those videos was to show how much more beneficial it is to have at least a team, at least a buddy pair, maybe a four-man team, conducting these things rather than an individual. So I did show some individual movement techniques in those videos, and I kind of received a little bit of feedback which I want to cover here. I'm going to address some of that feedback. So a little bit of the feedback I received was over my choice of live fire lane. And so I got this live fire lane, which I'm on again today. It's over that way. And I'm actually filming, sort of looking off to the right of the lane right now. And that's one of the things that people came across. They talked about how much there's more trees on the right-hand side and how much there's more terrain and trees on the left-hand side. Wouldn't it be better if I'd used that area? And of course it would have been, but it wasn't really the point. This is a live fire lane, so I used this creek. It's got a good backstop, and the idea is I was going to use this creek, camera at each end, and film it to show what I was doing. But I'll get into a little bit more depth on that today, because here at Max Velocity Tactical, we're playing chess, not checkers, okay? And one of the big things that nobody mentioned in any kind of comment, they talked about how, oh, you know, maybe we could have used more trees to hide behind, that kind of stuff. And nobody mentioned that I used a kneeling position throughout the whole thing. So if I really was a lone wolf, and this isn't about the lone wolf thing, this is obviously, it's just me out here showing some individual movement techniques, whether you're doing it as individual or preferably at least as a buddy pair, then you need to give some serious thought to use of cover and use of different firing positions. And that's what I want to cover today. So my chances of survival would have been greatly increased if I had not used a kneeling position at times, especially when on the individual assault where I put the return fire on there. Given the amount of return fire that I put on the video, I really needed to take cover, okay? Greater cover. And so there's a few things to think about, which is what I'm going to get into today. Now there's a balance. I don't want to get too weighed down in the individual thing, whether you're an individual or a pair, but there's definitely a balance between speed of movement and use of suppressive fire versus better positions. And of course, sometimes you can't have the best situation. You're not going to have the best situation, which is why going up this creek, it's perfect to show this. And actually, what a lot of people are missing is that actually in this creek there's a lot of micro terrain that can be used, and I'm going to do that because I'm going to run the lane at the end of this talk. I'm going to run the lane in the prone, just because, you know, I hate myself, and so you guys can have a good laugh watching me crawl around in the creek, okay? Just to show how I could use the micro terrain right here in the middle of the lane, not out using the timber on the sides. So there's no point, for example, all things being considered, the prone is the best position because it's a better stable firing position. It's overall, you know, more protected because you've got a lower profile on the ground. But then there's no point using a prone position if you're literally not using any kind of cover. Like, for example, if you're on a forward slope and you're crawling around in the prone, then you're just like a bug on a windshield. So you've got to balance this. In that situation, that's why often a kneeling position is used, because a kneeling position is going to be faster moving from position to position. And as long as you've got suppressive fire going down, and then you're moving faster, then it's a judgment call. And that's something that a lot of people are missing. On operations, everything you do is a calculated risk. Everything's a judgment call. You know, there's people complaining about me using this part of the range. There's people that there's the internet, if you post a picture of anybody on a trail ever, anytime, they're going to say, oh, they're on a trail, because they're living in a fantasy perfect fieldcraft universe. And in reality on operations, you're going to have mission requirements, you're going to be low on time, terrain's going to affect you, it's all going to affect you coming in towards having to take calculated risks. So a lot of what you do is a calculated risk. So, you know, it may be great to take a prone position, but at the end of the day, you need to move fast and get out of there. Maybe you're not going to do that. There's going to be a higher risk, perhaps, of being up in a kneeling position versus prone, depending on the situation. Okay, so everything's a calculated risk. When you take cover, when you take and break cover, you always need to identify the piece of cover you're going to. Now, so I've talked in previous videos in the how to react to contact video. I talked about head, body, weapon, how we're going to react with head, body, weapon. And I've talked about that, and you've got to understand that head, body, weapon also applies when you're moving. So head, body, weapon applies to me reacting and firing. So there's head, identify the enemy, body, weapon. Obviously, part of that, not covered so far in these talks, but covered in class, is obviously we're, you know, making sure that we're not endangering our buddies as we conduct our head, body, weapon. And the other side of head, body, weapon is that I need to identify the piece of cover that I'm going to. And so, for example, if I'm breaking contact to the rear, there's a tree behind me, let's say I'm going to this tree, then as part of my head, body, weapon, head, body, and then in this case, weapon is holding the weapon in a safe manner where I'm not going to flag any of my buddies as I move. And then I'll move to that piece of cover and I'll get into the cover. So as we're taking cover, breaking cover, and then taking cover again, whether we're going forwards, whether we're going backwards, whether we're going to the flanks, then we're using head, body, weapon to identify the piece of cover that we're going to go to. Now, when you get to that piece of cover, you need to work your cover. Because once you're in that cover, you then have to identify, reacquire the target, and then work the cover so that you can get shots on target. And then your buddy, for example, is then going to be able to move whilst you're suppressing the position. It doesn't matter whether you're going forwards or whether you're going backwards. So you work your cover. Something that was also, just to sidetrack for a quick sec, something that was also mentioned in some of the break contact videos was that if you're moving to the rear, then you may lose situational awareness, spatial awareness of where the enemy is. And I think more in terms of being an individual, that would give the enemy the time to move as you were running backwards, and then you'd sort of get into cover, and then you'd have to reacquire, and then you'd have to you know, relocate the enemy. Well, firstly, that's another great reason to have a buddy pair. That's why we do fire and movement, so that we have a buddy suppressing that enemy, preferably stopping him from shooting you in the back as you move backwards, and stopping the enemy from moving on you. And then he's suppressing as you get back to your piece of cover, and then you're going to turn and acquire and engage. You shouldn't, if you're training and you're trained, you shouldn't get so out of situational awareness that as you move back, you turn and you have no idea where the enemy is. It should only be as much as you move, you know, that short bound back, 5 to 7 yards, whatever it is, I'm up, he sees me, I'm down, back into a piece of cover, and then look up, and all you should be doing at that point is you should know the rough vicinity of where the enemy is, and all you're doing is working your cover in that situation. So that mere factor that you, if you're breaking contact, you have to turn your back on the enemy to make that move, does not argue that assault is preferable, because assault, you're getting closer to the enemy. If you're an outnumbered element and you're getting closer and closer to the enemy, not to mention the fact that when you get up there, the enemy's always alive when you get there. When you get up to, for example, there's like a hollow up there where I've set the enemy position. You've got all sorts of angles to deal with guys down in the hole. That's a highly risky situation. So you've really seriously got to think about whether you're going to assault forwards rather than actually, you know, think about breaking contact once you've been ambushed by a larger or a more, you know, a superior element. Just break contact. That's why we do it. So we move into cover and we need to work our cover. Now, some of you are probably familiar with like close quarter battle, where we're talking about being inside structures. And when you're inside a structure, everything we're concerned about is that vertical angle. We're always concerned about mainly vertical angles. That still applies out here in the woods. So for example, this tree behind me has a vertical angle on the left and a vertical angle on the right. So we're going to work that cover side to side. Also, when we're talking about micro-terrain, we've got horizontal angles. We've got various banks and dips, etc. So we're also working that horizontal angle. So what that means is, once I get into my piece of cover, let's say I dived into the prone position, and there I am. Now, it might be that the prone position is not the optimal position, because of that horizontal angle, because I need to come up, and you're always going to end up doing hybrid positions when you're out in the wild. So you might have to come up to sort of a squatting, hunched, kneeling, even standing position to get a view over the top of that horizontal angle to get shots on target. In a similar way, I might come back, for example, behind this tree, and then I'm going to have to come out at an angle using the vertical angle to get shots on target. So that's what we mean by working our cover. We don't just get there and say, hey, I can't see the enemy. We get in it and we work our cover so that we can suppress, so that we can cover our buddies. The other thing about use of cover, now, I'm in the woods, but this applies, so we're talking about trees, and we could be talking about dumpsters, vehicles, anything in an urban environment. It doesn't really matter. I just happen to be in the woods, but all these skills still apply. So, what we preferably want to do is not be right up on our cover. I don't want to be right up on my cover because this is going to restrict, it's going to limit what I can do, and it's going to shut down my situational awareness. What I preferably want to do is be back off the cover a little ways so that I can actually use the angles, and I can do this prone, I can do this kneeling, and I can use the angles on that piece of cover whilst having that situational awareness. Now, you can't be too fundamentalist about this though. I've got 4 targets set up there, so sometimes if the cover available is not large, you're going to have to be closer to it to shut down the angles of the enemy that's arrayed against you. So you've got to consider it carefully. We preferably want to be a little bit back from that cover, but if the enemy is arrayed out that way, then I need to be closer to it to actually make use of that cover. So these are all things that you need to consider. So we're going to move into cover and we're going to work it using the vertical angle, which usually means coming from prone to sort of kneeling to standing, whatever's appropriate to get up over that vertical, that horizontal angle, and then we're going to be leaning out using the vertical angle to get those shots at the targets that we need to get the shots at. So that's how we're going to work our cover. So for example, I've come over to the left-hand side of the lane right now. So this is kind of the creek bank. I did take up a couple of these positions when I was doing the other videos, and so what you might notice is there's a big tree over here, there's a tree here, but there's a bank here. So we've got vertical angles, we've got horizontal angles, and actually from here I'm kind of obscured from the left hand side of the target. So I might come into position here and I might find that, you know, prone isn't going to work for me here. I might be able to lean out using this tree. I'm stacking this tree here. Something I was going to cover is the idea I'm stacking trees, and so what I can do is I can lean out to get the right hand side targets, and then what I might have to do is I'm coming to the left, I can see one of the other targets on the right hand side, and then maybe I'm going to have to come up, and there we've got it, boom, 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 boom. So although it seems on the video that I'm just stood here in the open, I'm actually stacked back off a horizontal angle of the bank, and I've got the vertical angles on the trees. So what we're talking about here is the idea of I just mentioned it, it's stacking trees. And this can be with any kind of object. I mentioned that you want to kind of be back off it. Well, what you can also think about is if I'm behind something and I'm moving either towards the enemy position or away from the enemy position, I don't have to be on it to use it as cover. So I can use, this could be a dumpster, a vehicle, a tree, whatever it is, or it folds in the ground. And if I'm moving behind that object, then I'm increasing my chances of survival because I'm not just zigzagging in the open, I'm moving up obscured from the enemy, either using that behind that lump of ground or behind stacking a tree, as we call it. So you need to think about these things once we do this. If I get a moment at the end of this video without making the video too long, the other thing I want to address is the idea of a couple of people, when I did the individual break contact video, they talked about how they would do a mag dump and then run, which is it's the running like a raped ape philosophy of breaking contact, okay? So bad idea. If I get a moment at the end of the video, if I haven't done myself in on this going up the creek in a minute, then I'll do a mag dump and I'll run. And the whole point is, if you're running on your own, then that's going to give the enemy all that time to then, even if you suppress them initially, because they were like, whoa, he's dumping a mag at me, and then there's no mag coming anymore, let's pop back up, there he is running, and there he's running again. Because remember, when we do buddy rushes, we're doing I'm up, he sees me, I'm down. 3 to 5 second, 5 to 7 yard rushes. So he pops up and bop, 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 right in the back, okay? So it's not a good plan, which is why even as an individual, I was showing you individual movement techniques by bounding back, short bounds, turning and hammering the enemy, and then bounding again, until eventually I could use terrain, and I managed to get out to the flank.
Mag dump, break contact!
Dead by now. So what I'll do now is I'll rig myself up, and we're going to do this range as an individual assault. I'm going to set the camera up back there like I did before. I'm going to RTR in that kind of open bracken area here. There is actually some micro terrain there, so I'm going to get myself into that, and then I'm going to do this at either a prone or a crawl, or adapted to the ground, so that I'm maximum use of terrain and cover as I'm moving. The final thing I should cover before I do that is there is a method for taking cover. So I've covered before the RTR drill, so return fire, take cover, and return appropriate fire. Well, the method for taking cover is dash, down, crawl, observe, sights, fire. Dash, down, crawl, observe, sights, fire. It's all in the tactical manual, guys. So what does that mean? I'll demonstrate it. What it means is that as I RTR and I'm moving, that's a dash, whether I'm going to be firing that first R or not, I'm dashing, I'm then getting down into the prone position, and when we're doing this under fire and in the wild, there is no room for this sort of flat range cool guy stuff where we're going to do like kind of a burpee, one-handed burpee. We need to get into cover, guys. This is not flat range stuff, right? So we're going to get down into cover. Now the idea is that you hit the ground and then you're going to crawl for a little bit. Why do we do that? We do that because if the enemy was tracking you, trying to shoot at you, and then you went down, depending what cover you went into, he can still put rounds into that area, and not only that, he might be waiting for you to pop back up. Boom. So he sees you run. I mean, in this area here, we've got a lot of ground cover. So we've got cover from view. I'll say that again. We've got cover, which is going to stop the things that are being fired at you. And we've got concealment. And there's a lot of ground concealment around here, which in the British Army, the way I learned that was cover from view and cover from fire. Makes a lot more sense, doesn't it, right? Cover from view and cover from fire. So there's a lot of ground cover here, this bracken, etc., which is actually going to help break up the silhouette of the head once you pop the head back up. But so what we do is we dive down, and then we crawl, and then we pop back up in a place, hopefully not exactly where the enemy expects us to be. We can then get rounds off. If we're then going to break cover to move, this is more in terms of if we're going to get up and dash forwards, we should crawl out to the back or to the side of the position we were in, then get up, then dash forward, then dive down, then crawl to the side into a piece of cover, then pop back up and fire. So guys, when you're doing that, when you're taking and breaking cover properly, that's exhausting. So one of the things you should focus on here is building the warrior mindset, building the whole warrior, and part of that is physical fitness. You can have a laugh at me today. I'm not that fit. Watch me do this range at the crawl, recovering from spinal fusion. We'll see how it goes, okay? Hopefully I won't quit halfway up, all right? So, if you're a fat ass, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to sufficiently take cover to not die. You can maybe break contact like a beach ball if you want, roll back down the hill. I'm not sure how that's going to work for you, okay? But if you're going to get upset by me saying this, think again, okay? Because this is serious business. If you're trying to train to be sufficiently skilled to have a chance, if you're going to be engaged in two-way range combat, then you need to work on the PT. I'm working on my PT. I'm getting back to it, okay? You guys need to work on your PT too. Right. My plan here, film this, RTR to the crawl, and then see how I can do on the range at the crawl. I may be able to kind of get up and scoot if I'm behind some terrain. We'll see how it goes. Let's have a look at that.